The Elder Scrolls Online is a massively multiplayer online role-playing game that was made by ZeniMax and published by Bethesda in 2014. Everyone on the internet is always clamoring about when the next Elder Scrolls game will be announced, even though this game technically is the next Elder Scrolls game made after Skyrim. I guess the reason I don't see much discussion about this game is because it's the sort of game that you see discounted in the bargain bin areas of Best Buy and GameStop. At least that's just my experience. So the way I see it, according to public opinion, ESO is either so forgettable that it's not worth talking about, or it's a hidden gem that might be the Elder Scrolls 6 that everyone has been waiting for all this time. So objectively, how good is this game? I bought ESO during the 2015 Christmas sale on Steam. My brother and his wife, who was his girlfriend at the time, were visiting us for the holiday and they were talking about getting the game, so I chimed in and said I'd get the game too if I could play with them. So we all bought the game individually, spent the day downloading it, made our characters, and hopped into the game together. Side note, I recently saw a post on Tumblr about something called video game literacy. Basically, your gaming literacy is how fast you can pick up a video game relying on your past knowledge ingrained from other games with similar, universal mechanics. As it turns out, my gaming literacy at this time of my life was pretty low. The only games I had really played at this point was Lego games, Sims games, and Skyrim. I had no experience with online multiplayer games, but I figured this wouldn't be a problem because ESO was probably going to be just like Skyrim, right? No. You see, my novice strategy when playing Skyrim at this time was to steal everything in sight, especially good armor and weapons, and sell every bit of scrap possible to make money. This strategy worked pretty well in Skyrim, but as it turns out, getting away with stealing is a lot harder in ESO than in Skyrim. For some reason, all the guards can tell if you're using stolen equipment, and there's no regional law system like in Skyrim either. You could steal an item in one part of the map, and then all the way on the other side of the continent, the guards there somehow instinctively know exactly which ones of your items are stolen, and they will attack you for it. Also, if you don't have enough money to pay your bounty, the guards will kill you and confiscate all of your stolen items and all of your money. But I didn't know that, so in the first 5 minutes of the game, I stole some stuff, got noticed by the guards, and then spent the next few hours hiding in a ditch somewhere waiting for my bounty meter to slowly creep down. So after this negative experience, I decided to ignore the game for a while until I felt brave enough to try and figure it out again. Fast forward 3 years. I'm in college now. It's also Christmas time. But during this Steam holiday sale, I bought Black Desert Online, solely because of the Monster Factory video about it. I spent about an hour designing a character, started the game, and it immediately crashed. I was upset, so I looked through my library for something else to play. And because I had MMORPGs on my mind, I loaded up ESO again. I made my character, jumped into the game, and it was way easier this time around. I don't know if it's just because my gaming literacy has risen these past few years, or if all the patches to ESO have made it easier and more intuitive over the years. Either way, I proceeded to spend my entire Christmas break pouring about 160 hours into the game, and during that time, I leveled up my main character to level 50, the maximum level, with 124 champion points. That's pretty good considering back in 2015 I thought I'd never reach level 10. But now that I've talked about my personal background with this game, let's talk about the game itself. I didn't really pay attention during these quests, so this is just my vague guess on what's going on. The story of the game throws you into some conflict between Molag Bal and all of Tamriel. Apparently, some power-hungry guy made a deal with Molag Bal to let him have physical dominion over the world of Tamriel, meaning he's no longer bound to his realm, which is called Cold Harbor. After this deal was made, followers of Molag Bal began establishing these physical gateways between Tamriel and Cold Harbor, and these are called dolmens. These portals allow a bunch of Dremora and other monsters to enter Tamriel and wreak havoc on the citizens. You play as a victim of the sacrifice that was made to let Molag Bal into Tamriel. Basically, you don't have a soul anymore, but you were let out of Cold Harbor by some guy called the Prophet, voiced by Dumbledore, so that you can fight against Molag Bal, who I thought was also voiced by Dumbledore, but it turns out is just some other famous actor guy. Side note, when I checked IMDb to see who voiced those characters, I found out that there are a lot of famous people voicing the characters in this game, which is weird. I guess I expected the voice actors to just be the same 5 people they recycled for Skyrim and the Fallout games. Anyway, once your character escapes from Cold Harbor and makes it into Tamriel, you can pretty much ignore the main story and instead focus on the side stories, including the Alliance War raging across the continent. The three alliances in Tamriel, the Daggerfall Covenant, the Ebonheart Pact, and the Aldmeri Dominion, are all mad at each other for some reason. I think it's something to do with Cyrodiil and the Imperials. And so you can do countless side quests trying to bring peace to all these strife-ridden areas. Some of these quests are pretty simple, just fetch quests, escort missions, or revenge commissions, but some of them are actually fairly well written. One quest line that really stood out to me involved these vampires led by a guy named Verandus. It was a really long quest line, so by the end I was pretty attached to the cast of characters, and then the ending was really sad. Then there was this really short quest in the middle of nowhere where you run into a wood elf dude and his dying husband. He asks you to go collect these glowing flowers in the field because they have special meaning to him and his husband, but he can't go himself because the fields are swarming with monsters who have basically destroyed all the homes in this region, including their own. So you go collect the flowers, and along the way you see these visions of the two wood elf dudes when they were young, and you hear their conversations about their beliefs, their relationship, and their hope for the future. You hurry to collect every last flower, and you're fighting off monsters the whole time, and then you rush back to the wood elf, only to find that the husband has already died. I guess there was nothing you could do to save him after all, even though these magical flowers were supposed to cure him. You give the remaining guy the flowers, and he gives a eulogy about how he still has hope for the future even in spite of all the sadness and destruction around him. And then the dead wood elf's spirit causes these rare flowers to grow and fill the field. I don't know why that quest stuck in my head so much, and it wasn't connected to any other quest, but it just got to me for some reason. The quests in ESO are the single-player aspect of the game, and to be honest, they are a big part of the game. In fact, until you reach level 50, you can't really participate in the multiplayer part of the game at all. So until you grind to that point, ESO is a single-player Elder Scrolls game. The only difference between it and past Elder Scrolls games is you can't pause, because it is still an online game. You can see other players running around doing the same quests as you, and you can't fast travel for free from any point. You have to use the way shrines. But if you get past those obstacles, in my opinion, ESO is a pretty decent single-player experience. The quests can be repetitive, yes, but at least they all have that great Elder Scrolls lore flavor, including some familiar voice actors. But now let's talk about the multiplayer aspect of the game. And if I had to guess, this is probably the part of the game that turns a lot of people away. I talked about this in my gameplay video a little bit, but when you're playing a role-playing game like Skyrim or Fallout, the character you play is the only non-AI character in the game, which means your character is the one and only character that can have any active influence on the story, which leads to your character being designated the sole survivor, the lone wanderer, the chosen one, the dragonborn, essentially the most powerful, most special, most heroic being in the world of this game. But when you transfer that kind of storytelling into an online game, every player is the hero. And as we learned from The Incredibles, when everyone's special, nobody is. You'll be working through a quest to help out a spirit lost deep in some dungeon somewhere, and it'll tell you you're the only person it has encountered in hundreds of years. Then some other player will run up beside you on the same quest and get the same reply. It kills some of the immersion to actually see everyone on the North American mega server playing the same game at the same time as you. And that's not even taking into account your direct interactions with these other players. Thankfully, I haven't had too many negative encounters in this area, but I have seen plenty of trolls in the chat. There are two parts of the game that are designed for the multiplayer part of the game, and these are the group dungeons and the player versus player zones. I don't have any experience with the PvP zones, so I'll talk about the group dungeons. Getting through the quests in these dungeons grant you special rewards and extra experience. There are two ways of getting into these dungeons. You can either queue up for a spot in a randomly assigned group dungeon, or you can join a guild and group up with them. I've done both, and I learned that some players are super nice, and some players are super mean. But that's the case with all online games, so that doesn't have anything to do with ESO. There's one last thing I wanted to talk about, and this is probably the worst thing about this entire game. The bane of modern gaming: microtransactions. Now, the good thing here is that you don't have to purchase any microtransactions to make the game playable, but that also means that all the things that are up for sale that you can buy with real-world money are pretty much useless, or should not be charged for at all. For example, there's an option on the main menu screen to change your character's name, race, or appearance with the purchase of a corresponding token from the Crown Store. But when you go to the Crown Store, these tokens are about 2,500 crowns apiece. And then when you go to the Steam Store to see how much it costs to purchase that many crowns, That's like $20 whole. That is literally the full price of the entire base game itself, and that's how much they expect you to pay to tweak your character's name. The reason I looked this up in the first place is because I wanted to correct a typo in my character's name. When I first created my character, I thought you couldn't use spaces, and this was probably on my mind because this was the case in Black Desert Online. So I made my character's name using hyphens instead of spaces, but when I later realized I could have used spaces like I wanted, I went back to change it, and I found out it would cost $20 to make this tiny little change. I emailed support and asked them for mercy, but they told me to just buy the token if I wanted to change my character's name. Okay, we've discussed the good things about this game and the bad things about this game. So all in all, how does this stack up against other Elder Scrolls games? Is this secretly the Elder Scrolls 6 that everyone has been wanting? Well, no. But it's not that bad a game either, and I think a lot of people who don't like the idea of an online multiplayer Elder Scrolls game would end up liking it if they gave it a try. I didn't even mention what's probably the best part of this game, and that's the map. The world of this game is huge. The full title of this game, Tamriel Unlimited, is pretty accurate. Each region in this game is unique from the others and has its own distinct visual aesthetic and feel. You can spend hours in this game just sightseeing and still have a good time. But getting back on track, this game might be a weird conglomeration of a single player and a multiplayer experience, but that doesn't make it a bad game. I honestly think it's worth giving it a try if you're a fan of the Elder Scrolls series.